So my question is organ transplantation morally permissible in cases where the donor is non-viable and non-consenting? For my first argument, I will be using Kant's premises. Persons should treat persons as persons, stripping away all inherited ideas and maintaining the categorical imperative. Persons are rational beings that have autonomous will and a minimum moral sense. Rational beings are those who have the capability of mind to think, understand, and form judgments, based on logic. Autonomous will is a will which is completely self-legislating. Minimum moral sense is an understanding of the notion of worthiness of blame and praise. Kant's categorical imperative is a set of unconditional commands. The three statements of the categorical imperative are the following. We must only act in such a way that we can will those actions to be withheld by everyone universally. We must treat all people as ends, not means to ends. Therefore, every rational being must so act as if he were, through his maxim, always a legislating member of the universal kingdom of ends. According to Englehart's interpretation of Kant, we can give the rights of persons to certain beings without also giving those beings the responsibilities of persons. These beings are considered persons in the social sense. There are three different types of beings of which we can administer the rights of persons and not the responsibilities of persons: pre, post, and never, never. A pre-person is a being that has the potential of being a person, meaning they do not yet have reason, autonomous will, or a minimum moral sense, but they will have these things that make a person sometime in the future. An example of a pre-person would be a child. A post-person is a being that once had these things that make a person, but they no longer have those. An example of a post-person would be someone who received brain damage and no longer has the capability of reason, autonomous will, or minimum moral sense. Never never refers to a being that never had these things that make a person in the critical sense and will never have these things. An example of a never never being would be a human born with an extreme and untreatable mental defect. According to Kant, it is morally impermissible to violate the things that make a person under any circumstance. Things that do not violate personhood are morally permissible. Organ transplantation, or organ donation, is the process of surgically removing an organ or tissue from one person, the organ donor, and placing it into another person, the recipient. Transplantation is necessary because the recipient's organ has failed or has been damaged by disease or injury. An organ donor is the person or being from which an organ or organs are being taken from for organ transplantation. A viable organ donor is a donor that is alive and all of their main organs are intact and they have the ability to continue having a life worth living. A non-viable organ donor is one who is dead, dying, or one who cannot live as a person. Organ transplantation, in cases where the donor is non-viable and unconsenting, is an ethical issue because not all people agree that it is an ethical procedure to perform. According to Englehart's interpretation of Kant from premise 5 and 6, taking organs from unconsenting humans is unethical because it violates their personhood in a social sense. According to Englehart, non-viable humans would be considered post-persons in the social sense, so taking out their organs, thus ending their lives, would be violating their personhood, even if they were basically already dead. However, if we take Englehart's interpretation of Kant out of the mix and only look at what Kant himself says, the answer to the question at hand would be yes. Organ transplantation using a non-consenting, non-viable donor is morally permissible because the donor no longer has the things that make him a person, as listed in premise 2. So by taking their organs, we are not violating their personhood.